On a mark, get set, go. Alright, so again, you take notes of whatever pops out at you. Chapter 5 opens with Ralph preparing for the meeting. While there have been several meetings already, this is the first time that Ralph spends any time preparing. He chooses to walk on the beach to think, because it's the only place where he can walk freely without having to watch where he's going. Ralph comes to realize how exhausted he is by life, jaded on the island, and recalls the first day when he explored with Simon and Jack, remembering it as if, quote, it were part of a brighter childhood, end quote. There's a hopelessness and sadness in the comparison, for Ralph is still young, but feels distance from his own childhood. Whether he will be happy in the future seems unknown. Next paragraph. Ralph also realizes how, quote, unpleasant it is to be wearing a dirty shirt, uncomfortable shorts, and to have hair hanging in his eyes. As he approaches the platform, he sees how its triangular shape is not quite right, and that the tipping log where many of the boys sit has never been fixed. His, quote, strange mood of speculation that was so foreign to him continues as he prepares to sound the conch shell. He realizes that a chief must be wise and a good thinker, but recognizes that he is not a strong or shrewd thinker, especially in comparison to Piggy. His values have shifted. When all the boys have gathered, Ralph tries to explain things simply so that even the smallest will understand. He states that the assembly was called to discuss a serious matter, to set things straight, and proceeds to describe what they are doing wrong, namely that decisions they make in meetings that then are not carried out. That's a typo in a major scholarship. Okay, but you get it right. They had decided, for example, to collect fresh water and to keep it in a certain place, to use one section of the rocks as a lavatory, a bathroom. Yet these rules were only followed for a short while. Similarly, while many pitched in to build the first shelter, by the time they got to building the fourth, only Simon and Ralph completed the work. Next paragraph. As he speaks, Ralph is strong and steady, although at times the listening boys are giggling and not recognizing the seriousness of the situation. Ralph adds that without the fire, they will die. But even this does not seem to focus the group's attention. He also announces that from then on, they will only have a fire on the mountain. Many want to speak against this decision, but Ralph talks over the group and again tells them that they must listen to him since they named him chief. Jack wants to interrupt, but Ralph says he still has more to say and then tells the group what they can talk about. He says that things started to go wrong when the boys began to get frightened, and he tells them that they can work on, quote, kind of deciding on the fear, end quote. He tells them again that there is nothing to fear, but Jack assumes a different approach. Jack is angry and calls the young boys names for being babies. He differentiates, too, between fear and the beast in the forest that many still believe is there. He says he has walked the entire island and no beast exists, so they should not think about it any longer. Quote, and as for the fear, he adds, you'll have to put up with that like the rest of us. But there is no beast, he tells them again, which draws applause from the group. Piggy speaks next, and even though he is made fun of, he persists and explains that not only is there no beast, but there's no reason to be frightened. There's no reason to be frightened. He purports that the world is scientific, and that soon men will be traveling to Mars. He repeats that there is nothing to fear, but then pauses and adds, unless we get frightened of people. When the others laugh and poke fun at this statement, Piggy turns to let the little ones speak, so he says the older boys can show them how silly they are. But when the first one speaks and describes his terrifying experience, even though Ralph explains that the boy was having a nightmare at the time, the group sympathizes and is unsettled. Piggy draws another small boy forward, his behavior similar to that of the boy who initially spoke about the beast when the boys first arrived on the island, and then ended up lost and dying in the fire. At first, the boy will not speak, and Ralph and the others force him to do so. He provides his whole name, as well as his address, and the beginning of his telephone number, before he starts weeping. The others tell him to be quiet, but he cannot stop. When other small boys start crying as well, the only thing that finally quiets them is Maurice performing some funny stunts. Again, the older boys dismiss the idea of the beast, the older boys do, and press this small boy, Percival, to explain where this beast could possibly be hiding. Percival replies that it comes out of the sea, causing a new wave of fear among the group, and explaining the chapter's title, Beast from Water. Maurice becomes the first older boy to admit that they do not know for sure that the beast does not exist, a confession that evokes complete chaos. Amid shouts and yelling, Simon then asserts that the beast may only be us. Simon tries vainly to explain, quote, mankind's essential illness. He tries vainly, meaning he tries to explain it, but he doesn't succeed. Nobody gets what he's trying to say. After which a member of the group suggests that maybe Simon is really speaking of a kind of ghost. In reaction to this assertion, both Piggy and Jack want to speak and end up fighting for the conch shell, until Ralph interjects. Ralph admits that he made a mistake in having the meeting so late, that perhaps the topic is not an appropriate one to be discussed as it gets darker. While earlier he had shown growth by realizing Piggy's intellectual abilities, at this meeting, he appears to have diminished in his role as leader. While he recognized the need for the meeting and started it off on a strong note, the topic of the beast was one that had been discussed previously, had not been effectively resolved yet. Bringing up the beast again shows Ralph's seemingly irrational belief in the power of common sense to always triumph. Ralph thinks that common sense will always triumph. To make matters worse, he asks for a vote. To make matters worse, he asks for a vote. That's so interesting. To show if they believe in ghosts, even though, again, he probably will be unable to dissuade any believers, to make any believers stop believing in ghosts. In an attempt to save Ralph and the situation, Piggy berates the group. Quote, what are we? Humans or animals or savages? What's grown-ups gonna think? Going off, hunting pigs, letting fires out, and now Jack tells Piggy to shut up, and when Ralph finally, and without prodding, stands up for Piggy, Jack loses control. He orders Ralph to be silent as well. Wow, Jack orders Ralph to be silent as well, and questions why he should be chief, since he gives orders that do not make sense, he cannot hunt or sing, and he always favors Piggy. Ralph shouts back that Jack is breaking the rules, quote, the only thing we've got. Jack, however, says he does not care about the rules, gives a wild scream, and jumps off the platform. The participants disperse, screaming and laughing, and then chant in a revolving, dancing mass. Piggy and Ralph remain on the platform. Piggy urges him to sound the conch, but Ralph says if he does and the others do not come, they will have lost everything. The fire will not be tended, and there will be no rescue. Quote, we'll be like animals, he said. Some of you are so attention deficit, it's a sad thing. Ralph draws the shell to his lips, but then lowers it. He asks Piggy if ghosts exist. Ralph asks Piggy if ghosts exist, and says he should not be chief after all. Piggy tries to reassure him when they realize that someone else is sitting with them as well, Simon, who also says Ralph must remain chief. Piggy wonders what would happen to him if Ralph was not chief. Ralph, again unaware, says nothing would happen to him, but Piggy explains that Jack hates Ralph and Piggy, and since Jack cannot fight Ralph, given the opportunity, Jack will fight Piggy. Simon agrees. The boys voice their wishes that a parent or caretaker were present, as then everything would be all right. As much as Piggy and Simon are keen observers, they still hold childish views of adults, believing adults always know what to do. I would never have devolved into disputes and lazy, irresponsible habits like the children on the island have. Ralph, seemingly foolishly, wishes that the adults could give them some sign. If only we had a sign. The three are now so disturbed that they reach for one another when they hear a chilling noise from the dark. The wail comes from Percival, although the three boys do not at first know what the sound is. Percival, Percival, the boy that no one wants to believe, is the last voice in the chapter, instilling fear among the strongest boys and deepening the pervasive sense of foreboding. The end. Okay, not a word from from you, so you failed. Did you take any notes?
Yeah, double standard.
My pencil.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you, when I tell you to have your pencils out and to listen for things that you want to talk about, and I spend time trying to help you have a focused conversation, and I say listen for things and take notes, and you ignore me, and you sit and you don't do it, you will not get a good grade from me, all right? How much effort does it take you? And I'm talking to all of you. Zach, I looked at you, and you were seeming to pay more attention to Colin's notebook than you were to what was coming out of this very, very perceptive summary. So the rest of you, going forward, let this help you have a good conversation, all right? Can you comply, Two-Face? Thanks. All right, so who went yesterday first? Or last time first? So the people who went first last time, you go outside and start working on chapter 6.
You've never gone.
The last one went second.
The last one was first. I remember.
No, we went
We
all
went
first.
first.
They went with the discussion first.
We did something first.
Who discussed first last time?
Then
They did. They did.
We did. We did.
We did.
Molly.
they discussed first. We went out.
We did something first.
So you guys stay this time,
Yes.
you guys go out.
Yes.
All right. Start on chapter 6.
Oh yeah.
This is when you said movement.
Okay, the time is either 10:20 and we have until 11:20, so you come back in 25 minutes. So that means at 45 hours.
Because you know I'm all about that bass. Thank you for saying the summary, because I had a bunch of notes, and I left my notebook at home.
I want you to tell me who, yeah, I want you to just think of the best things to talk about in this chapter. Things are getting really, I want to hear your most intelligent remarks about this chapter. Can you pass me that, please? Just the tip of it. Thanks. You are pink or green?
Pink.
You're so pink. Especially you. You. You're so pink. And this is chapter 5. And we have 23 minutes. And who's absent? And she's in this group, isn't she?
She's at a wedding.
Wedding? Where?
Either Belgium or Indonesia. That's where she's from. I don't know.
Okay, let's go. What's a good question to start with? How about this one?
Patterns.
Is there really a beastie?
How about this one? What are the most important changes that have happened in this story in this chapter?
Oh, well, it started with Piggy. I think Piggy is finally starting to stand up for himself. Also, he is starting to become a little mean to the little ones. Like, he was really yelling at them to shut up and all. Which is a new thing coming from Piggy. Because because you've always seen him being kind to them and helping them and kind of explaining things to them, but now he's kind of being mean. So that raises the question that if Piggy kind of loses his kindness towards them, how will that impact the group? Because the little ends will end up being just and will end up being run over by the big boys.
And do we know Piggy's age? Cause like, is he a little one?
What do we know?
He's about Ralph's age, I think, a year
I think
younger.
he's
probably
he's
a little bit
Like
younger.
11.
He seems a little bit younger than Ralph, but one of the big boys compared to
Yeah.
the little one.
Spice Brain.
So let's stay with Piggy right now and think about how the author did it. What is the author doing with Piggy? So we see all sorts of things happening to Piggy through this story so far. Can you think of any images, symbols, anything else besides the sort of change in personality? Sid. We'll come back to you.
Because I read ahead, so I'm getting
Piggy's taken the power a little bit. He's kinda, I think like Piggy kind of wants the power instead of like he wants to take it from Ralph, but then Simon doesn't want anybody but Ralph to have it.
I don't think Piggy wants to take the power from Ralph. I just don't think Piggy wants anyone else really in charge, like especially Jack, because of the conflicts they've had.
I think like
And remember you're supposed to be helping each other let go. Do you have any evidence here?
You
Habit
have
formation.
Do you have a better bubble?
well, I think we get a sense of like Piggy that this is the first time that I've actually seen Piggy actually like really frightened, because at the end of the chapter all of the groups of the little ones and the hunters, they sort of like split up, and we see like the group of boys who came here as one leaving as like 3 and 4 groups. And so I think Piggy, this is the first time that I saw Piggy get frightened with Jack, because if the group ultimately decides to split up, Jack is more likely to attack Piggy because no one will be protecting Piggy. And I think if Ralph decides to give up his leadership, everyone will be like on the same power level. And I think Jack, if Ralph decides to step down, Jack will then have the power, because ultimately he's already got power over the choir group. So
I think I can help you out, like with the transition maybe of power between Ralph and Jack is when like Jack gives his forceful and intimidating speech to the little ones about the beast, and how at the end they suddenly applaud. It's kind of weird for them to applaud after I think they're applauding out of fear. So with that being done, I think that gives Jack some sort of power that Ralph may have trouble gaining, because Ralph's not that person that's forceful like Jack, who's actually like yelling at the little ones or doing stuff like that. But with the sudden applauses, especially in the last chapter when Jack apologizes to Ralph for letting the fire go out, that wasn't really sincere, but the hunters took it as sincere. I think that kind of symbolizes the kind of transition of power.
I think that Piggy will never have as much power as Ralph, because when Ralph has the conch, he says on page 82, Jack says, but you've talked and talked, but he says, I've got the conch. But later into the chapter, when Piggy's got the conch, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have the same, the conch doesn't have the same power when Piggy has it, because when Piggy talks, people can interrupt, and he's like, but I've got the conch, but everyone else is saying, oh, it doesn't matter, who cares, it doesn't matter, we can just talk over you. And that really shows that Ralph has a dramatic amount of power compared to Piggy. And yeah.
I think
I agree, and I also feel like the conch is kind of, you can see throughout this chapter, the conch is kind of losing its power. You see that people are having to fight even when they're holding the conch to speak, And I feel like that fear of losing power and losing the kind of whatever rule system they have, I think that's making Ralph a lot more fearful of not. I think he's kind of feeling like now, how will we ever get out? We don't have the group is not unified anymore. I feel like they're all going their separate way. They all have their own. They all have their own agendas, and I feel like that is affecting. And a symbol for that is the conch and how how the conch is losing its power.
But I feel like, as far as the start of when these rules started to break was Jack, because we get a sense of this maybe like a chapter ago when he first interrupts Piggy with the conch, and I think being Jack, because he's more of the aggressive type, and that's what I put in my notes, that Jack, when you look for a leader, you look at more of like, you want a leader who knows what they want, when they want it, and how they want it. So I think Jack is more aggressive, and I believe that's why he gets the applause from the boys. And Ralph is a little more passive. Well, he came off passive at first, and that might have hurt him, because when you come off as passive, people think they can get things by you. And so when you try to act serious, you can't really take them seriously because they started off as passive. So
I don't.
Hey, I want to ask a question. We started off talking about Piggy. What do you think the broken glasses, and was that the last chapter where his glasses were broken?
No.
Okay.
The one before.
Now, do you think that is in any way being followed up on in this chapter?
yeah.
He
So let's try to like what's the author doing here again? That's where it gets fun.
he brought it up once, I think, just saying that Piggy kind of took off his glasses and looked at everything from a different perspective, and kind of I think Piggy was, I don't remember. I think he was unsure. Maybe somebody can help me with what happened there. It was in the middle of the chapter when he took off his glasses, and I don't really remember what happened there. Somebody else can talk.
I'm wondering this. Could the broken glasses? It's an image, right?
Yeah.
Glasses are bifocals too. Now, one of them is gone, and he's like, I'm half blind, and all sorts of things. So, the change in his glasses. Could that be a symbolism or a foreshadowing or anything? Can you sort of?
I think that it can be a foreshadowing of because he said that, like you just said, that he lost one of his and he can't see from one eye, and I think you lose his partner, maybe Ralph, somehow in the future.
That's a good start.
I
Keep
have
going.
a kind of I have a kind of different interpretation of the breaking of the glasses. So like Mr. Bell said, it's like a bifocal. So there are kind of like two people in power of this group of people, Ralph and Jack. So Jack is kind of like ruling over the hunters while Ralph is overseeing everything. And then like in this chapter we start to see that Ralph is kind of losing his power. So it's like Ralph is a broken glass, he's losing his power, and he can no longer accomplish what Jack might be able to do in the future.
My interpretation of it was so at the beginning Peggy still wasn't listened to, and he still kind of isn't listened to now, and I feel like because Jack will go for Peggy, and a lot of people won't support Peggy or do anything for Peggy, so he's over here trying to get people to listen, and I feel like maybe his two eyes are his two lives, and one's gone. One right now is gone, like, and he has one more chance to get people to actually listen to him. Otherwise, that's broken too, and then he can't see anything, so he just has no choice but to give up whatever he's trying to do for the group, which could lead into some conflicts.
I'm sorry, this is my fault. I was squiggling out a line because I made the wrong line on my chart. So in one sentence, what's your interpretation of this?
My interpretation of the glasses is that his lenses are like his two lives and like his two chances to get things done in the group, and he's already lost one, and conflict could come out if he loses the second.
Okay.
Another thing that his glasses could mean is like it's kind of moving closer towards savagery, because like whenever you think of people in the jungle that are like killing animals to get food, you don't really picture them with glasses, and it's like they've already gotten rid of the clothes, so it's like they don't have anything man-made really, like, and then except for like the glasses, which is like the last piece of like clothing, I guess. But
And it's
they're
not only
really,
clothing, but what else is it that civilized people have more advanced forms of that savages
Vision.
don't? No, no, no.
Kind of like looking or whatever.
Technology.
Technology, right. The symbol of civilization. We make glasses, all sorts of things we can
And then
make.
So I
And so,
I
and so that's
found-
very good. I'm sorry. Where's Allison? Oh, there she is. Okay.
So I found the place where on page 72 where they mention the glass again, and it says that he took off his glasses and blinked at them. The sun had gone down as if the light had been turned off. And I think that's kind of symbolizing Piggy's seeing everything falling apart, and he's seeing everything is kind of going down the drain, to say. I feel like he's now wondering what's gonna happen with us, what's gonna happen with the whole groups, and everybody's going in their own direction. I think Piggy's very fearful of what will happen to him and what will happen in terms of their being rescued, because you see Piggy constantly shooting out ideas that they can make a sundial, and people aren't really seeing what he's trying to offer to the group as hope. But I think now Piggy's kind of feeling like, my ideas are being shot down, the group's gone, now what's left of us?
And
I'm so sorry, but there are so many things that I do want to guide you through, and that means I have to interrupt you, and I apologize for that. I don't like doing it. I know it's frustrating. Percival's hugely important in this one. What's up with him? What's up with this little kid? What does he represent? And there's one more thing. Please help me help you by simply following along here and putting this in your notebook. Because Lale just gave us a very nice close reading. She found text. Alright, do you have your PDF open so that you can just and see? That's smart. That's so helpful, Lale. Thank you. Because what's his name? Golding Dew? He said, as if the lights, what?
He took off his glass and blinked at them. The sun had gone as if the light had been turned off.
Now notice the as if the light had been turned off. So the author is using figurative language here. He's using a simile, and he's choosing to connect. Stay with us, guys. Stay with us. Stay with us. Zach, stay with us, because it's just right there on the board. Glasses, as if the light had been turned off. The author is equating right there. I am actually making a direct connection through a simile between glasses and light being turned off. In other words, when light is turned off, what's left?
Darkness.
And what is light a symbol of then?
Light is hope, and then the darkness is uncertainty.
What other things can it be? Because again, remember,
guidance.
let's keep going. What other things can
A
light?
clear kind of, you can see it's a clear path.
Maybe like an easier.
What is technology a symbol of?
A new innovative idea.
Innovation. Innovative.
What is a jungle versus technology? What do those two things symbolize, guys?
Simple.
Civilization, right? Can you not see that light, enlightenment, civilization? We've got rules, we've got technology, we've got order, everything works, we're not savages. The light itself is a symbol of civilization. And so when the light goes off, what happens to civilization?
Turns into savage.
Because again, he's playing with this stuff. Let's talk about Percival and what Percival represents here. Percival is hugely important. What do you think about what's going on with this new development, Percival?
I think Percival represents like faded memories, because after he says his name, he gives his address, and then when he's about to give his telephone number, he can't remember it, and then he starts crying. So I think he forgot his telephone number, and after he starts crying, all the other little ones start crying, and I think they start crying because they can't remember their old life, and they have to get used to this new life on the island. And
A good start. What else can we say about Percival and what he might represent?
I think he represents fear, and because that's the beastie, but I think I think the fear he has is the fear that all the boys have deep down inside. Even because he's little, so he's showing it, but I think the big boys are trying to conceal it, But Percival's just kind of thrown it out there, and he's just not being able to control his fear like that Big Boy's not being able to.
That was a very perceptive remark. And by the way, Lala, I've meant to talk to you, and all of you who didn't do well on your argumentative, no, on your informative essay. I want to give you a chance to improve your grade on that. You are a really good thinker, and your writing grade doesn't. So we need to work on your writing to make your writing as good as your thinking. That's a common thing. There's some people who are excellent when they talk; they're so smart, but when they write, it doesn't happen. And so I do want to work with you, all right, and give you a chance to make, because that was such a good. When she said he's a little one, but really the fears that are going on inside this little one are also in the big boys too. That's a really, really insightful thing. So let's go back to Percival and his fear and his behavior and everything, and think symbolically about, like, on the deepest level that you can, what sort of stuff is going on with Percival. If Percival were a type in any civilization, what type of class would he belong to? I mean, I think we can say that Ralph would belong to, like, the management class, right? I'm sorry, Piggy. Piggy would belong to, like, the management class, right? He's taking names, he's keeping records, he's organizing things, he's thinking of how he can manage everything. Ralph would be like a politician. What would Percival and maybe Simon be?
The people that are like
Voice of the people.
They're kind of the following.
Well, the little ones would be, they would all be common people and followers, but there are other social classes, major ones.
They could be like the lower class people because they're scared about like what's gonna happen to them and if they're gonna keep a job and like if they're gonna be able to get enough money to feed their families.
But let's keep thinking now. What is Percival's main contribution to this story? What is he doing? Start with, like, okay, he does this specifically. What is he doing specifically here? What are his actions? Right in front of your nose, huh?
Crying.
Okay, is it just normal crying?
No.
It's
Is it normal crying?
They said that as if the information was rooted far down in the springs of sorrow, the little one wept. So they're kind of comparing it to a spring of water when it suddenly just starts gushing up.
And the roots of sorrow, far down the roots of sorrow. So what's coming out of him is like the roots of human sorrow. And he's not just crying. Isn't he wailing? Don't they say
He's
wailing?
wailing, and it's uncontrollable.
And what is the effect of his wailing on everybody else?
Start
Like that
crying
is
too.
And does he have any control over this?
No.
And so what is he representing here in terms of, like, what sort of power does he have? Because this little boy has power. He has just affected everybody else with power. Not like he wanted them to start changing their behavior and do. He doesn't want them to do this, but he has power over them, doesn't he? They're all crying after he does. What type of person in any human society has a power to, like, tap into everybody else's deepest sorrows and fears and make them, like, really scared of things and really need somebody to make me feel better?
Like priests are kind of like that because they're like, if you don't do this, then you're gonna go to hell. And then it's like, oh, but you can come talk to me if you don't feel okay.
Counselor.
Now, what do you think of Allison's suggestion that priests are similar?
I agree, but I feel like Percival doesn't have that kind of authority like priests do. So I don't have an idea, but I just feel like it's a good thought, but I feel like he doesn't have the authority like priests do.
Does anybody else? Do you remember the language of extend, challenge, and qualify? Extend is yes and, challenge is I disagree, and qualify is partly yes and partly no. I agree with. Can anybody qualify maybe what's going on between these two? You say maybe he's a priest. You say I don't think so because he doesn't have authority. Can we qualify this and say that part's not priestly, but isn't another part priestly? What part is priestly? I mean, Allison, I think you can say it because you're the one who saw it.
He is like freaking everybody out and saying like you're gonna die basically.
Because of what?
Because
What's the thing that he's freaking everybody out about?
He believes in.
No. Let's be specific. What is the text? What is? No. He's talking about one thing, isn't he?
The beast.
The beastie. Can you do anything with that? Can you?
Maybe like the devil. Is the beast the devil?
You tell me.
Amazing.
You tell me. So we're in the deep ends now, and isn't this interesting? And think of Piggy's reaction to it. Maybe the beast is the devil. Keep going.
Maybe because, like, I don't know. Devil tries to, like, tempt you into doing.
Anybody else? Yeah?
Okay. I thought that the beastie kind of symbolized like death, and all the little ones are scared that like, oh, we're gonna die on the island, and then the big ones are like, no, we're gonna get rescued because Ralph's dad or something like.
And what's so scary about the beastie and how death happens? And Sid?
They don't still know what the beastie is.
They don't
That's
know
scary.
where it is.
And what imagery do we see of the beastie when we see it? Do we see any image at all?
Darkness.
Just darkness, right? Darkness and this
And
fear that death is gone. This is very, 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 very religious, isn't it? This fear of some dark power that's gonna kill us, and it's evil, and it's like seeking all of us. Now let's talk about Piggy's reaction to it. How did Piggy react to this fear that's breaking out around everybody? He said,
It's clever. That's a clever beast if it can hide on this land. And then it says Jack's been everywhere. And then where could a beast live?
okay, so now pull back out of it, and instead of
Denial.
keep talking. Denial. How can we describe Piggy's reaction to this most clearly?
He's scared of the truth.
Yeah, I think he's trying to sympathize with the little ones, but he also, like Ralph, wants to blow over the fact that he wants to say, there's no beastie.
You're not seeing Piggy's strength here.
I'm gonna kind of go with that. Piggy knows that maybe the beasties are within them because of their nightmares. So like, I think maybe Piggy's like reaction towards it is kind of just like trying to like calm them down, like say that there's actually no real figure coming after you. It's
So what sort of person in society would Piggy be? Our guy with the glasses who's saying there is no dark force to be afraid of. In terms of religion, is he a religious person?
No, because he's taking. Like I remember one incident in the book. He's like, it's all scientific. It's all.
Good.
It's all in
Good.
the mind.
Now please go outside, and before you start reading, please take some notes in your journal about what we have seen here, please. Because Piggy is the voice of reason. Piggy is the voice of reason, rational thinking, modern thinking. And what we see on this savage island is this explosion of religious fear and superstition, belief in a beastie. And Piggy is the only person who seems to be saying, don't do that. Look what Golding's doing with his Piggy. And then we didn't get to talk about Simon.
Oh.
But we can't because I gotta let the other guys in. I can't because I've gotta let the other guys in. I've already let you go 2 minutes. So put that in your notes too. You will be writing about this,
Wait,
guys.
when do we have to go back? 2 minutes before.
2 minutes before. Was that helpful? I feel like this was a good one. I hope you agree. Start looking for the symbolic stuff, right? Suddenly we've seen like the birth of religion, the conflict of religion versus.
I think before we start, like when we split into our groups, I think each group should come up with a list about either like the top 5 things of what we need to talk about and get those done before we start going into like things that don't really matter as much.
Put that on anonymous feedback.
So are you just thinking about that?
Which one is this?
Sorry. I need this to be down there, and you're making it hard for me to with your little softballs. Whoa!
That's funny.
Okay, can you please help me? All right. Can you just stand up, move back, and let me in? Thanks. Can you navigate that little cable? Thank you. to empty all the papers out of this thing, it'd be much easier. Look at our little narcissist. Look at our little narcissist. Why don't I see you next to him?
Okay, let me move. Scooch in. Scooch.
Hey,
Yeah.
our little narcissist. You know what a narcissist is?
Yeah.
Who likes to look at his own reflection. All right. Our opening question. What are the most important changes, themes in this chapter? How has the story most importantly changed? How has the story most importantly changed?
Do you start?
I need to find my. I just had some paper. Oh, yeah, good, thanks. Thank you. Okay. If you think that people are talking too much about something that's less important than you think should be being talked about, I want you to say, hey, can we talk? I think there's something more important here. Go. You're green, right? Good.
One of the biggest changes that we can see in the book, I think, is the doubting of Ralph's status in the group.
I agree with you, Alex. And you can also see how, as he starts thinking more and more as a leader, the boys start to go against him more and more because they have to do more work, and even though Ralph's making smarter decisions, it makes them do more work, so they don't like it as much because they don't see in the long run how it'll help them.
Well, I also agree about the change in Ralph's leadership, of the group, but I think it's also there's a lot of increase in self-doubt because now he doesn't think he's fit to be leader anymore. He's only staying on because others are encouraging him.
Yeah, and going along with what Alex just said, Piggy's trying to make Ralph be leader still, because Ralph's doubting that it should be leader. So I think Piggy is saying that Ralph should be leader because if Jack became leader, Piggy's ideas wouldn't be listened to, and Piggy would be less important than he already is.
Going along with that idea, also I feel like Piggy and Jack, while Jack's being less confident, Piggy's getting more confident in his ability to speak out against the group. As you can see, during this chapter, he was speaking out to the group, and even though they were all telling him to shut up and be quiet, he kept going and he was confident in what he was saying.
Colin, what was your point before, Nadia?
That if Piggy's pushing for having Ralph be leader, because if Ralph isn't leader, Jack will not be interested in Piggy, because Ralph listened to some of Piggy's ideas and valued him more.
Okay. Okay. So Piggy's growing importance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of
I agree with Colin's statement, but I also think it's out of fear because Jack really tends to bully Piggy and tends to discriminate him. So I think he wants Ralph to stay a sheep, not only because his ideas won't be listened to, but he might even be sort of exiled out of the group.
I kind of agree with the fear part, but I think it's more of selfishness because he wants his ideas heard. He wants to protect himself, and he wants more power, I guess, over the group, like intellectual power for the good of the group. And without Ralph, he doesn't get any of that. So I think it's out of selfishness, yet still kind of courtesy to keep Ralph in power, in charge.
Now, does anybody think that we've done enough on this Ralph, Piggy, Jack rivalry, split, and all sort of thing, and there are other things that we should spend time talking about?
So, also during the chapter, we noticed that Simon is becoming like more of an evolved character. He starts getting included in the conversations, and when they talk about the beast and how the little ones are like terrified, he actually is one of the first people to actually stand up for them, and that he sees the evil in people and he sees it in mankind. And throughout the book, we've seen that he's like this really pure, like good person, where he's protecting the little ones, he's defending them, and he's trying to keep them keep their courage and their hope up. And so I think he's kind of like a Christ figure, because he was like a choir boy and he had like the cross on the uniform, and I feel like he's
You're
trying
so
to
good. You're so good. I mean, you know, like I was like, wow. I'm not like saying I know that. I'm saying, oh wow, you just made me see some stuff. Nice details. Good, go ahead.
Following with what Alexis said, she mentioned the Simon part and on the Beast part, but then I focused more on Jack, and I personally thought Jack had something to do with the Beast, because from the beginning, when the topic of Beastie came out, Jack usually avoided the subject. He was like, oh, of course there is no Beastie, what are you talking about? I'll catch it when it comes out. However, in this chapter, it was very noticeable that Jack had something big to do with the Beastie, because especially it was all in page 72, when first the boys were like, oh, what would a beast eat? And then the other people were like, pig, we eat pig, and then piggy. So Piggy, at first then at that point I was like, oh, Piggy is scared of the Beastie, and later on in that same page, it's Piggy said, unless we get frightened of people. So then I noticed, I just guessed that Jack is the Beast and Piggy is frightened of Jack, and continued on in page 76. Someone says Jack has been everywhere, and that means Jack has been everywhere, but then he hasn't found the Beastie yet, and I'm guessing that was because Jack was the Beast. And the boys suggest that the Beastie is actually a ghost or a split, but then in the end they decide it's not, and then Piggy says, oh, it might just be us, and then he says, unless we get frightened of people. And then before in that same page, as I mentioned, they say that the Piggy is what the Beastie eats. So I was guessing Jack has something to do with the Beastie and the Beast.
That was really complex. It's just how long it was. And that's like, more?
And like following on to what Lisa was talking about, more evidence that Jack has something to do with the Beast is that at the very start, someone said that the Beast came from the forest, and Jack is mostly in the forest, like because he's a hunter and he's trying to look for food.
Jack, obviously, I mean, it could be a beast, but also, I think this book has many different layers of, like, you know, reality and everything. And I was just thinking about the book, and I think that each main character, for example, Ralph, Jack, and Piggy, they all represent a part of the human nature. So I think that Ralph represents just the random person, like a regular person. I think Piggy represents the intellectual part of human nature.
Slow down. Characters as human nature. And you say that Jack is the what? Piggy is the what?
Piggy is the represents intellectual part of the human nature.
Okay, keep going.
And then I think Ralph represents the normal person, like just a regular person. I mean, he may show a different human trait later, but for now, I think he's just a regular person. And I think Jack represents the savage part, that all humans will eventually, I mean, if they're faced with survival, I think that, you know, everyone turns savage. And I think that Jack represents the savage part of it. And I think Simon represents the part where just appreciating everything. appreciating and noticing the world, I guess. And that's what I got so far, but I think if I read more in the chapter and everything, if I look closer, I'll be able to figure out.
Notice, just to comment for a second, notice what she just did with the characters, and she made each character represent a part of human nature. So what type of reading is she doing, this novel as Anne?
Pattern.
Isn't it? Isn't it a
Yeah.
different way to do allegory?
Yeah.
Each character is a different part of human nature. So this is an allegory about the human soul or the human psyche, whatever. Interesting.
Connecting.
Okay, I'll just say this really quick. You said that you thought Ralph was just a random person.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I can't figure it out
Let her
yet.
go. Let her go.
Yeah, but I feel like Ralph shows like the maturing of humans, because in this chapter he seems to have like suddenly matured all of a sudden, and he's thinking properly, and he's thinking all logically like Piggy does. So I feel like he's the maturing part of human nature. Kind of.
Well, connecting to Naharka and her interpretation of the allegory within the book, I agree that it's an allegory, but I think it's more regarding like power in democracy, because in the first chapter, when Ralph first summons the others, at first he doesn't know where how to blow the conch to make it sound, and so it sort of shows like how when you first form an institution or a government, it's always very shaky at first, and there will always be kinks and glitches that you need to work out, like at the assembly, how they were really disorganized at first, and then later when they started speaking, he created like the rule how you have to have a hand up, and then he'll give you the conch, and that's sort of like the ideal model of democracy, where it's the government of the people for the people, so that the population has voice and effect on the political decisions, so that laws are established to benefit the population. But then later, when Piggy is first denied the right to speak, it starts to show how there is bias for social class or caste, and so it sort of connects to how sometimes governments make it harder for a certain kind of demographic that can vote, harder for them to vote, like how governments in the USA sometimes require people to vote with voting IDs, so then sometimes students can't because they're constantly moving around. And then the last one is the alliance between Jack and Ralph. It really shows how sometimes democracy is sort of like an oligarchy, because only the people with wealth and power and respect in society, like the 60% of the election funds were only donated by like 40 men. That sort of shows like how if you have power and wealth in society, you have a greater effect. So I think that's what the book is really trying to show.
Can we move on to another topic?
Yeah.
So, last night when I was reading, I came up with like a bunch of webs with the colors and everything. And so I found with white, it can represent several different things, and one of the most highlighted aspects is like purity. I think it symbolizes purity. And the beach is often described as white and soft. And so when Ralph is walking along the beach thinking, and on page 65 it mentions the sun in his eyes, and I had also created a chart of yellow, which I believed as like a mirage of hope, or like a distant ember that people want to believe in, and it's like kind of blinding him. He's unable to see clearly. And so at the meeting on page 67, it talks about, it says, the place of assembly filled quickly, Jack, Simon, Maurice, most of the hunters on Ralph's right, the rest on the left under the sun. And I feel like the sun in his eyes and under the sun is like how the boys are following blindly. They're following the leaders without actually understanding what's really going on.
I came up with something with regard to sun as well, and usually when in the readings I've read, everywhere sun represents God, or like the person who is high up there, who we respect and we look up to. However, in this chapter, I thought differently, because I thought sun can be portrayed as peace or safety,
which has something to do with God as well. Because as the sun goes down, in this chapter there's constant mentioning of the sun's position. At first there's the sun, and then it slowly starts to go down, and at one point they say its sun's gone, no more sun, and as soon as the sun goes down, after that one sentence, the boys start having conflicts and fights, and they start arguing about their opinions and how they swear at each other. Percival goes crazy, and like the human nature, the savage part of them comes out. So maybe that I thought that was the reason why people are scared of the dark, because sun symbolizes God, and then it also leads to peace and safety. So that's what I thought about this chapter that has something to do with the sun.
Now, I'm sorry to whoever was going to speak. Sometimes I do need to interrupt, and I know that it can be annoying, but at the same time, there are some things that have not been brought up yet that are hugely important, and I want them to be brought up. Who are the new characters? What are the new developments in this thing that we have not seen before?
There's emphasis on other characters besides Ralph.
And that's what I'm asking. So who are the other
Percival,
characters?
Maurice.
Let's talk about Percival. And let's talk about him in this way. Let's think like 5-year-olds. We see Percival do this specifically, and we hear him do this specifically, like 5-year-olds, the most basic stuff, but clearly, what is the basic, clear stuff that he does? And then let's go into the deep end. The author is doing something incredibly deep with Percival. What is the author doing with Percival based on what the author shows us Percival doing? If you want to like actually think, and as Alexis so nicely mentioned, web it out for a second. If you want to think and web it out for a second, a little mind map. I'll help you a little bit in order to speed this along. First, going back to Naharika is interesting, and by the way, there are many ways this can be an allegory, so nobody's right and nobody's wrong, but Naharika's theory of the characters as parts of human nature is interesting. I want to offer a different type of allegory, maybe similar. If Piggy were one class or profession in society, one type of social class, based on what Piggy's role is in this book, what type of profession or social class would he be? Would he be a president?
No.
What would he be instead?
Scientist.
A good teacher.
You say a scientist. What's your evidence for that? I'm not saying you're wrong.
He says life is science.
Okay. What other things does he do that show some other roles he might?
Advisor.
Because?
Because he's advising Ralph, like giving him ideas on what to do and how to
Okay.
lead.
Good. What other roles might he, or jobs might he be like a natural type of character?
Teacher.
He's always taking lists, making names, organizing stuff.
Accountant, secretary.
Yeah, like very managerial, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Ralph is clearly an obvious sort of social role. What would Ralph be?
Leader. At least
He's a
some
leader.
form of
He's a leader. Okay. Jack is clearly a different type of.
Military.
He's more like
Now, so yeah, he's definitely a warrior type character at a minimum, and we can go into other things that he could represent allegorically. Let's talk about Percival as representing a certain social class. Now start webbing. What member of society would Percival represent? Start webbing. Let's do it for just like literally 60 seconds. Start with facts and then generalize to the deep end. some simple things. And then what person in society has that type of power based on that type of behavior? It's not art. In 30 seconds, we're going to see where this goes. We're going to start talking 30 seconds. This is for Jamie. She's not here. Okay. Let's start with what he does, because the author is showing us, and he's leaving it up to us to like go, I've seen it. Now, why is he doing it? Why is the author doing it? That's the deep reader. So what does the author show us so that we can think about it clearly? Give me 1 second to erase this so that I can write really big for Jamie. This is for you, Jamie. Enjoy your wedding, you bum. You sweet girl. Jamie's very sweet. She's always the one who says, Mr. Bro, would you like some tea? And I appreciate that. That's kind. That's thoughtful. Okay, Alex, what does Percival do?
When he's coaxed into saying his name, he says his full name and his address, then his telephone number.
Okay. Does that have a lot of power? What are the power? This kid has a lot of power, doesn't he? And it's not because he's.
Because he started crying, all the other kids followed.
Okay, so he's crying.
Bawling.
What language does the author use? Does he use crying?
Sobbing.
Thank you. Wailing. Wailing. Does he use wailing?
Yeah.
Doesn't he also like say weep?
I'm sure. But, so as you know, here's a useful thing for close reading. What's the strongest word he uses for this action? Yes, he says crying. Yes, he says sobbing. But the strongest and the most extreme is wailing. And to wail is a very, very strange thing to do. So he wails, and that does have power. What power does it have? Power is changing things around you. That's what power is. So how does he change things around him through his wailing? Go
It's like the belief, because he's like fearing stuff, so then other people will fear it too.
So he causes fear in others. Is that a good paraphrase of what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's causing fear. Let's keep going. What else do you have? Naharika.
Kind of not peer pressure, but everyone else follows him crying. All the kids start crying as well.
Yeah, we said that. He's causing fear and they cry too. Follow in your hymn.
He sort of represents all the little ones, like, because the big ones are in their group, and then there's the little ones. But it looks like Percival represents the little ones.
He is a little one. And so he represents the little ones. What do we make? Okay, let's keep going and let's just get our list of everything that we have to say before we start going deep on all of our choices. Annie.
He claims to have seen the beast.
He has seen the beast. Is it beast or beastie?
Beastie.
Is that I-E at the end?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any details that we want to throw in this? He's seen the beastie thing?
Imagination.
I think at first he said that he saw
forest, or and ocean.
But he didn't want to talk
Like,
about
he
it.
like
But
the
other
or and
people,
fish.
other people was like he saw it too, so he didn't want to stand up first in the beginning.
Okay. All right. So, any other actions that Percival is shown or heard?
Well, he didn't talk very well. Like,
He-
when he talked, they had to have Jack like listen to him and then say what he said.
Okay. So, what do we make of that? That he is
Introverted, timid.
he's timid. He's like sort of socially weird, right?
Socially
Awkward,
He's a social misfit. And he was a social misfit from the very beginning, right? He was the one who was sickly, the one who stayed all by himself, the one who had diarrhea for days or something, right? In
Yeah.
earlier chapters, am I right? So he's a social misfit. I believe if you go back in earlier chapters, the first time they showed Percival, I think they even described his face as being all blotchy and like his skin is like weird and bad and all sorts of stuff. So he's a very, very interesting character because suddenly he's not just a social misfit, he's an incredibly powerful social misfit. Alex.
I don't know if this is relevant, but he drowsed off after he said the beastie came from the sea. He went to sleep.
In the long grass.
He went to sleep.
So how do we describe that state? What just happened to him? He
He
like
was
wails and then he
traumatized.
speaks of the beastie and then he
He
drowses
Prophet!
off.
Mm-mm.
What did you say?
A prophet. Like the oracle.
Why are we laughing? Isn't that exactly? Isn't that amazing? So what type of character, oracle, prophet in the modern world, what sort of social role comes closest to that? Priest. Now can we look at causing fear, I'm looking at the clock, this invisible beastie, the beastie. What is the beastie a symbol of here? If we're talking allegories of human society, what is the beastie a symbol of? It is dark, it causes death, you don't know when it's coming, you're terrified of it. So this dark force that could be anywhere. It's in the forest. No, it's not in the forest. It's in the ocean. Ah! Is it just the little ones who he represents
No.
and gets scared? It's the big boys too. They're all afraid of Beastie, except for one character. Who's the one character who says no?
No.
Piggy.
Because he believes in science.
Because he believes in science. And so what does he do in response to this prophet, this priest, saying there is a dark force?
Tells Ralph to continue.
Says that life is just all science. Like,
Don't believe it,
don't
because
It's not true.
there's no dark mysteries like that. Don't believe it. There's no Satan. There's no Lord of Evil. There's no spiritual world of fear. It's all reasonable. Right? Look what's happening in this allegory. We see in this primitive society, religions start to be born. What other characters figure into this birth of religion in our story?
Simon.
Besides Percival, yeah, Simon.
Isn't there a person named Simon in the Bible?
Yes, Simon was one of Jesus' favorite disciples. We just entered the deep end. Do you see how you can do that? I mean, what about Piggy and his glasses being broken? He went from having bifocals to now unifocals. He's only got one lens. And when he puts his glasses on in this scene, does anybody remember what the author did with his language as he could only see for one eye, and the author actually goes into Piggy's point of view, and he says that the world looked like as if the lights were going off. What are glasses symbolic of?
Clarity.
What other things in this story? We've made
Fire.
webs.
Fire.
The fire is an example of this. Glasses are an example of this.
Oh.
Sundials are an example of this. Tools, in other words.
The
Technology, and technology is a sort of emblem or image or symbol of civilization. What's going on with Piggy here? Because Piggy has lost half of his image and the light is civilization, and now things are as if the lights have been turned off and things are getting dark and people are getting scared, and there's a Satan and there's a priest and there's a prophet and there's all sorts of stuff. This is an intensely interesting book.
Wait, did they come up with this as well?
We went there with some shepherding. I'm glad you found your notebook. I'm glad you found your notebook left in the library. Here you go, Jamie. Light of my life. Song of my soul. Really?
Yeah.
Hell and damnation. Show me how to flip it.
No, it has to. You have to finish it first. You have to finish it first.
I know, but hell and damnation is a cultural thing. All right. Today's Thursday, so our homework is simply this. That was chapter 5?
Yeah.
Chapter 6?
Are we still doing?
Monday.
Are we still doing the charts?
Peace out, Girl Scouts. I'm out.
Yeah, you're still doing the charts. Always doing the charts.
Version of the charts. I don't like the connection part. That you can't explain.
I connected something to my historic.
What do you think?
Connection? Connection.
No, but can we like add like in the connections right about why we think this is an important thing?
Well, that's your insight. Your insight is what you think. It's what you
Where do
see.
you write the insight?
There's an insight
Next to it.
part in there in the
Inside
table.
is the first
That's the
column.
first column.
No, the second
But
column.
that's when you write like
Look, dude,
characterizations.
however, whatever order you want to take it in,
Just fill out the chart.
here's the detail. This is what I see there. Here are the connections I make, and here are the questions that I have. Like, is Percival a priest? You know, is Piggy an atheist?
Wait, so this is due on Monday? Monday?
Monday is chapter
6.
6.
Oh, sorry.
We need a wig. We need a patient. Medicine isn't gonna work just like that.
Why do these cameras not
Once
film in the...
once you enter
No, yeah, you have to end it first.